Hi, Jen.
Hi, Carol. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Is Heather with you?
She is not with me. I think she's going to join separately.
Okay. All right.
I'll mute myself.
How's that? Is that better?
You're beautiful.
All right, welcome everyone. We'll get this party started soon.
Unmute my speaker. No.
Hello, Mayor.
Hi,
How are you?
doing okay. How about you?
Good. Ready to get the show started.
All right.
All right. How's everybody? We have about 140 RSVPs, I believe. So wait a few minutes because we have about 58 on the line right now. And then we'll get started. But if you guys want to put your view, those of you that are on the line, and Leslie, if you could put in the chat, and also the program in the chat. But if you want to put your view on a side-by-side speaker view, that way you can see the PowerPoint and the speaker at the same time. So a little housekeeping. We are going to mute everyone unless, you know, right now you can say hello, talk, say hello to people in the chat. You can chat for the next 2 minutes. And then we're going to blow through State of the City and give you a great celebration. Hope you've stocked up your own alcohol and food. So. Or non-alcohol.
Yeah, I'm figuring we're gonna finish in record time.
That's right, Paul.
It's always good to see you, Ma.
Nice to see you, Paul. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. Yeah, last time we toured your facility.
Yeah, it's
good. Thank you.
That's true. You're welcome back there anytime.
I'd love to come back and
Thanks,
see it.
Clay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Sounds like you're in. Make sure to mute, and I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yola Dore, she was like our first ticket sales. Thank you, Yola. So wonderful to see you. I can't wait to see you in person.
I agree.
Hey, everyone. See Terrence again, Jonathan, Ted, Larry Block. It's like big family. All right. Hi, Linda. How's the library?
Well, we're still closed. The library's open, but the bookstore is closed.
Oh,
Soon. We have some protocols we need to set up. It's a really small space, and
yeah. I don't know. I keep hearing different things, like they want masks inside again. And I think, you know, I just put on a mask when I go in a store. I think that's the, you know, I think that's.
I think the new variant is a game changer too. I think there's some issues that we have to look down the road about.
And I think when you go into places where they have to wear masks, wearing a mask is solidarity with the employees who have to wear one. I'm fine with that.
Me too. Me too.
I agree.
Hello, Councilmember D'Amico. Hi. And Mr. Josh Kerpies. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Councilmember Shine, and I saw Councilmember Meister earlier as well, or Mayor Pro
Hi,
Tem.
Jen.
Hi.
I am.
everyone.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Right. Hey,
Hi,
Deborah.
hi, Genevieve.
Who's that? Where are you? I'm looking
It's
at
your
the-
other, it's your
Uh-oh.
favorite council member.
Oh, hi, John. How are you? I should have recognized that name. All right. Well, we're going to get started, and I'm going to put my view on speaker view. And we're going to get started, and people can join, but we want to, it's 5:06, so we want to get out and get you guys out so you can have dinner or whatever and continue to celebrate. We were going to do sort of a hybrid event, but I think at that time it was a little too iffy. So this will hopefully be our last virtual State of the City. I'm praying. Welcome. And as the invite said, West Hollywood is open for creativity. And if everyone could mute themselves, that would be terrific. Or Nalani will just mute everyone for us.
Excuse me, Jen, I'm sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
I must have hit something. All right, thank you. Yeah, just speak up. It's one family. We're all casual here. We've gone through a pandemic, which most of our business community, thankfully, is survived and is back on the road to recovery. But it's going to take a solid partnership with you, our business community, our city staff, our elected officials to ensure that we can thrive in the next few years. There are still tough challenges ahead which threaten our full recovery, such as eviction moratoriums when lifted, the future of retail brick and mortar and commercial office spaces, harmful legislation and helpful legislation, commercial real estate, I think I might have said, and finally, it's vitally important that our tourism economy be able to thrive and get our hotels fully back online. How our elected officials in our city, county, and state use their power in government will really determine much of our ability to recover and prosper. And you're going to hear today from some of the city representatives on what the council and the city are doing to help support our businesses during the pandemic, and how these temporary programs that they put in place might be used to create a new business landscape and a new environment in West Hollywood's commercial districts. So I want to thank our panel moderator tonight, Mott Smith, and our city staff, John Kehoe and Jackie Rocco, for agreeing to be on the panel tonight to discuss our post-pandemic plan of action. The West Hollywood, which by the way, Janet came up with PPP, the new PPP, post-pandemic plan. The WeHo Chamber is doing pretty well. But like any business or nonprofit, the chambers had to pivot in the pandemic and find new avenues to allow us to operate and continue to advocate and stay on mission. We took on the management of the bids a year ago. Thank you to the city for their confidence in us and the bid chairs and boards. We also produced recently a branded Pride event. And I want to thank Madonna and our Pride Lives Here street team, Craze social media company, Ruben, and the entire chamber team for all of their hard work on Pride. We just got a report on Pride, and it's really astounding how much we got out of the media. We are in the midst of creating a 501. Everybody please mute yourselves. I'm getting feedback. Nalani, if you want to just mute people, that'd be great. We are in the midst of creating a 501c3 foundation for the chamber. Its focus will be on the small business initiative and support for small business, minority entrepreneurs, and leadership and educational programs for our LGBTQ+ and BIPOC community members. A special thank you to the City of West Hollywood. Our city council members, our city manager, Paul, and the amazing staff, Janet Jimenez, Paulo Kespriak, and Tara Warden. They've been remarkable during this pandemic, including Kristen Cook and the sheriffs and Danny Rivas and all of the team, Cleo and Megan, et cetera. Paul, we wanted to make sure we got one more State of the City with you. Your leadership has been immeasurable. Your finesse in balancing not just the budget, but a dense population of commercial districts and residential neighborhoods coexisting while continuing to further economic development in the city is nothing short of astounding. David, we look so forward to working with you at the reins as the reins are passed to the captain of the shift of its new steward. And we're fortunate for you to step into the role, and we're here to support you in any way we can. We lost great people over the last year. Our member Dora Madrano, owner of Atacama Homes. Dora loved the chamber and we love Dora, and our hearts go out to the Atacama family. And Steve Afriat, longtime board member and governor, and was loved by so many in our community. And we felt a huge loss in his passing, and he will be sorely missed. Rest in peace, Steve. I do not do this alone. As you know, the chamber rebuilt a dynamic team during the past year using chamber members, such as Leslie Espinoza, our director of membership and communications of Ivy Boutique Marketing Firm, our longtime accountant and now CFO, John Goddard of Dynamante Management, and our amazing administrative assistant, Nalani Santiago, who has been managing the clerical needs of all the bids in the chamber and has gotten us organized, our office reopened, and back to tap card metro services. And of course, our artistic director, Ruben Esparza of Red Studios, who provides all of our sexy graphics and puts up with my edits, mistakes, and numerous omissions. When I say, wait, don't go yet. One of our funding mechanisms is an event such as this. And the chamber is funded by the generous contributions of our sponsors, our members, and people like you have bought tickets and ads for these events. And we hope to have we're going to have Creative Business Awards on November 17th in person at the One Hotel. So stay tuned for more of that. So we want to thank all of you for coming. And we want to really take this moment to thank our sponsors. So I'm going to share my screen here and start from the beginning of our slide presentation. So first, I want to thank our partner, the City of West Hollywood. We do this every year. We've been theming it, and we partner with the city and look at our economic trends. Athens Services, Beverly Center, Cedar Sinai Medical Center, CIM Group, Latham and Watkins, Manny Brothers, McDonald's La Brea, Orange Barrel Media, and Sunset Marquee. Our advocate sponsors, Block Party in WeHoville, Silver Creek, Faring and Comma, Capital Drugs, and the Springboard Hospitality Group, which is our 4 residential hotels. Well, not all residential. The Grafton's not said that. Grafton, La Park, Chamberlain, and Montrose. I want to finally bring us to our big sponsor of the night, our presenting sponsor. US Bank has been with us from day one since I've taken the reins 12 years ago. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you our US Bank's Assistant Vice President and also a Chamber Board member, Rahel Cook.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rahel Cook, and it is my privilege to welcome you to West Hollywood's State of the City 2021. US Bank is proud to be a sponsor and longtime partner of the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. As a private wealth advisor for US Bank, I help my clients define their goals and understand their options. I've worked in banking and financial services since 2001. Together with my US Bank team, I help businesses, individuals, families succeed by providing comprehensive wealth management strategies tailored to their specific needs. I am honored to be a board member, a member of directors for the West Hollywood Chamber. Important to US Bank, the organization supports and promotes local businesses in the community by providing resources and leadership through economic development. We have a wonderful program planned for you this evening that includes, like Jen said, a discussion panel on the city's post-pandemic recovery plan. But first, it is important and necessary that I acknowledge and thank West Hollywood's outgoing city manager, Paul Arevalo, for dedicating 30 years of service to our community and welcoming incoming city manager, David Wilson. We are excited to hear from both today. So let's get started. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you West Hollywood Chamber's Chair, Nick Rimedio.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to be here. Great to virtually see all of you this evening. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Lindsay Horvath, council members John Erickson, John D'Amico, and Seppi Shine, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Lauren Meister. We have Senator Ben Allen, Assemblymember Bloom, our sheriffs, Captain Ramirez and Lieutenant Mulder, of course, our chamber leadership led by Genevieve, Nalani, Leslie, John, you are all amazing. Thank you so much. And of course, our executive board, our board of directors, and our board of governors. I'd like to also acknowledge the loss of Arlen Andelson, as well as Steve Afriot, 2 long-term board of governor members who are dearly missed tonight. Echoing Jen's comments, it's hard to believe that we are here at the very end of June, marking the halfway point through 2021. It's been, 15 long months since we started to see when we were last actually all together for a chamber event at the AMBI Awards in March of 2020. And here we are at a time and a place where hope and recovery are coming to life. We just were fortunate to celebrate an amazing Pride weekend in which we saw our streets full, our businesses full, a time to really celebrate and to celebrate that community. As we present this evening's program, Open for Creativity, it's clear, to echo Jen's words, now more than ever, we need a strong relationship with our city council, with our city government, with the business community that's built of trust, mutual respect, and support as we rebuild for these stronger tomorrows. You know, indeed, how many of us had our businesses severely impacted? 15 months of depleted revenues, reaching into savings. Yes, there was government support, but we're still recovering from that, and it's going to take years to recover. And we know that. There are sunny days ahead, thank goodness, but we know that it's going to take so much time to rebuild. And we know that the city felt our pain as well, as they experienced a deficit in hotel tax revenue and sales tax revenue. They have a long road ahead of them. And so we think that this Opening for Creativity really paves the way for us to have a new partnership with the new council, with the new city manager, David Wilson, where we can really focus on how do we get to pre-COVID 2019 revenues and better. To generate surpluses, to together rise and build that future that is so bright here in West Hollywood. That truly is the way that we can build back better, is if our business community is thriving. And so before I say my introduction, I would like to say a farewell to outgoing city manager Paul Arevalo, whose leadership for the last 30 years but also in the last 16 months has been second to none. Paul, your voice was the constant source of reassuring. Your steady leadership on the spot was always so appreciated by all of us in the business community. Thank you for 30 years. We're so excited to see what's up for you. Definitely enjoy the time ahead, and we know that you won't be too far away from us. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our esteemed Mayor, Lindsay Horvath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you to the Chamber for once again hosting us in this virtual space, and to everyone who is supporting the event tonight. We certainly appreciate it. It has been quite the year, it's fair to say, and I know that we've been working together quite diligently to make this event possible, but to get us to this point. And because of unprecedented times we're living in, this is the second time I've had the honor of delivering this address. And so I really appreciate the opportunity. I also want to thank our staff who made tonight possible, and also acknowledge my colleagues, as has been said already, Mayor Pro Tem Lauren Meister, Councilmember John D'Amico, Councilmember John Erickson, and Councilmember Seppi Shine. We are working diligently to continue this trajectory that we are on. And so the last state of the city, we were in November of 2020, just a few days after a historic election for our city and for the country. And despite some positive changes that had been happening, there was a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, And sure enough, not too long thereafter, further shutdowns, lockdowns, isolation, and separation continued. They were all back in our reality. And at times it was just hard to believe that there would be light at the end of the tunnel. And a little over 6 months later, here we are beginning to feel the darkness of the pandemic lifting up. And in West Hollywood, over 70% of our residents aged 16 and older have received at least one dose of COVID-19. The number of positive cases and hospitalizations in LA County and California continues to remain low. And our economy has been able to safely reopen this thus far. And we see people coming back to West Hollywood. And on that note, our recent partnership between the city and the chamber on our inaugural WeHo Pride delivered not only safe in-person opportunities for celebration, but record-breaking numbers for LGBT-owned businesses that serve our LGBTQ+ community and are central to our community's identity. And local news coverage indicated that the number of tourists and hotel guests are increasingly on the rise. So I'm especially grateful to the Chamber for this partnership, and also to all the members of the business community, as well as the workers in those businesses who helped to contribute to that success. And I look forward to the city building upon this success for Pride next year with more celebration, more community connection in true West Hollywood fashion. In my comments last November, I highlighted the fact that the city of West Hollywood has a strong foundation shaped by our core values, which have been our history as well as the formation for our future. Our values have remained consistent despite changes and challenges that we faced, and our values will continue to be guideposts as we move forward into a new era. This especially remains true as we reemerge from the COVID-19 public health emergency. And it's also relevant as we witness the end of an era with Paul Arevalo as our city manager and welcome in David Wilson to take over this important position. Paul has guided the city responsibly and effectively for over 20 years. Because of his leadership and diligence, the city was in a strong financial position prior to COVID. We were well equipped to handle the financial challenges brought on by this pandemic, and his experience in local government, his deep knowledge of our community, his responsiveness to the needs of business stakeholders, and his leadership at City Hall have helped guide us through this unprecedented time. And I am fully confident that David will continue this fiscal responsibility as we move forward. We understand that the financial success of our city and our businesses is also related to the health, safety, and success of our residents and community members. Over the past year, the city has made it a priority to expand protections that safeguard our most vulnerable community members, to ensure community and employee safety, and to advance rapid response to pandemic reopening measures. Throughout the pandemic, the city's executive and management teams have been in constant contact with local, county, state, federal, health and government officials, including our business and local nonprofit leaders, local hospitals, neighboring cities, and public health officials. This coordination was essential because it allowed stakeholders to share their knowledge and to brainstorm creative solutions to emerging issues. And I just want to also acknowledge our city staff who truly stepped up in this moment in extraordinary ways to be of service to our community, whether it was the communications department implementing a robust community education program, to our planning and public works departments and code division, all working hand in hand in innovative ways to get our businesses back up and running, to keep people safe, employed, and in business. We know that they're continuing to figure out how we can keep that going in the future and help businesses to safely operate and remain successful long-term. And community-based organizations formed and stepped up as they always do in West Hollywood. And I'm so incredibly proud of the ways that the people of West Hollywood came together. That was recognized by in many places, including the LA Times, for the success of keeping people healthy and safe. And it was because of the people of West Hollywood making that happen. We know from a residential and social service perspective that the economic impact of the pandemic on our many local residents has been immediate and severe, particularly on those who lost their jobs and can no longer afford to pay rent, or in some cases even put food on the table. And so city staff and our council came together to enact solutions to address these problems, whether it was enacting an eviction moratorium to protect residents who are unable to pay their rent, or allocating about $2 million local dollars on top of funding we got from other levels of government or other places for expanded social service contracts to provide emergency funding for rental assistance, eviction protection and defense, and legal services, food delivery services to community members. We offered culturally competent services from longstanding relationships with LA LGBT Center, JFS, and JVS, to newer relationships like those with Planned Parenthood, Trans Latina Coalition, and Trans Can Work. And our work to serve the diverse needs of our community is not done, and I'm grateful to all those who continue the work for our community members. Our city staff and community members have worked closely with social service providers to assist community members experiencing homelessness, including providing access to local shelter, supplying necessary items such as personal hygiene products, masks, bottled water, and of course, referrals to social services such as addiction recovery and mental health support. Going into the pandemic, the city's intersectional approach to combating homelessness had a high success rate, helping approximately 80% of our unhoused community members in a year access housing, services, or both. And despite the effectiveness of our local strategies, however, the region has not followed our lead, and we've seen the devastating impacts in our own community. So there's much work to be done on this level as well, and I'm personally committed to delivering those results. Transportation, of course, is a personal passion, but it has also shown to be a critical lifeline for our residents and community members in this time of emergency. Our transit services allowed people to access testing, vaccinations, critical health appointments, and essential service deliveries. Our local transportation services, as well as key regional partners like Metro, have been critical and effective, and I'm especially excited for the work we continue together. Of course, in terms of business adaptation and services, our city's businesses were some of the hardest hit during the pandemic, particularly our restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues. The city immediately convened with business community to assess what steps could be taken to assist. And similar to the residential eviction moratorium, we enacted a commercial moratorium to make sure that those businesses who were figuring out how they were going to be able to pay their rent were able to stay there while they figured it out. And for the businesses that could operate, the city relaxed regulations for curbside pickup, temporary signage, other issues that helped to make operations more efficient. After the first few months of the pandemic, as restaurants were allowed to reopen outdoors, the city began to implement a robust outzone program, which allowed businesses to expand into public and private spaces that kept them going. Those are continuing through the end of the year, and I know that our staff is looking at ways that maybe some of them will be able to continue past that. We also know that the bottom line is always on the minds of our business owners, and to that end, the city deferred business taxes while also delaying or waiving altogether many other business fee payments to keep businesses going. So as we're moving forward, we're starting to see an end to the pandemic, we hope, and a return to a new normal life in the city of West Hollywood. Will be committed to a COVID recovery that includes everyone. And this means with everyone who lives, works, and plays here to address ongoing impacts from the pandemic and to put measures in place that will help the city come back stronger than ever, which our panel will discuss more tonight. We remain committed to serving our unhoused residents and to looking for new creative solutions to ultimately end the homelessness crisis in the Los Angeles region and Southern California. We remain dedicated to bringing Metro Rail to West Hollywood, to easing traffic congestion, curbing climate change, and providing modern world-class public transportation to and from West Hollywood. We welcome our new city manager who makes history and epitomizes cultivating leadership from within our community. Starting as an intern, David Wilson has worked at all levels of City Hall and has been that calm and steady presence that we have counted on. even when we didn't know it. And we all look forward to working with him as we build our future together. But as we move forward, we will never forget the people on whose shoulders we stand. It is so difficult to imagine a West Hollywood without Paul Arevalo. Okay, maybe we have gotten used to not seeing him in his City Hall office, but our community will certainly miss his energy, his charisma, and his leadership, which have benefited our city for decades. Paul, you leave an indelible mark on our city's history, paving the way for a brighter future. We thank you for all that you have done, and we wish you the best in all that you will do. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I will now turn it over to our incoming city manager, David Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Horvath. Good evening, everyone. I am David Wilson, currently the Assistant City Manager for the City of West Hollywood, and soon to be the City Manager with an effective date of July 7, 2021. For the past 20 years, only one person has given the State of the City address from the perspective of the administration of the city, and that person has been Paul Arevalo. He has served as City Manager for over 2 decades. I tried encouraging him to give one last State of the City address, but he is far too wise to miss the opportunity to keep his mouth shut. For full disclosure, I am coming to you from Palm Springs. I planned a brief vacation before starting the new position because I don't plan to have any vacations anytime soon. When we got here on Sunday, it was 119 degrees. It dropped to 115 yesterday, and now it's a chilly 107 today. So I hope to be back with you all in the city of West Hollywood next week. Thank you to Genevieve Murrow and Nick Rimedio for your leadership in the business community and inviting me to speak tonight. Thank you also to the chamber members and the entire business community for all the work you continue to do to make this city thrive, especially during these difficult times. I look forward to continuing partnerships with the business community that have been developed by Paul and others at the city. Next slide. The City Council adopted the fiscal year 2020 budget at its June 21st City Council meeting. This is the second of 2 one-year budgets that were planned for consideration while the city has time to better understand the financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and plan our recovery. Typically, we do 2-year budgets. The transmittal letter on page 28 of the budget provides a high-level summary of the city manager's recommended budget. I will briefly provide a summary of the city's financial position and then talk about our major priorities for the coming year. This slide shows the trend of the city's general fund revenues and expenditures for the past 5 years. It includes 3 years of actuals from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2020, and the approved budgets for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. The city has a long history of conservative budgeting, which is shown by revenues exceeding expenditures in the pre-COVID years of 2018 and 2019, and also by our strong reserves. We are actually in the process of refunding some bonds that was issued by the city's former redevelopment agency. We just got information that the credit rating that we are receiving on these new bonds represents a 3-notch upgrade from the rating on the outstanding bonds that are being refunded. And that's just unheard of as it results, especially in the wake of COVID. But this is due to the financial stability and fiscal stewardship of the city's past leadership and present leadership, including those who are leaving next week, and the past and present city council members. But the COVID-19 pandemic has had its impact on the city's finances. This is a closer look at the 3 fiscal years directly impacted by the pandemic, fiscal years 2020, 2021, and 2022. We experienced a $6.3 million budget deficit in fiscal year 2020 from the pandemic impacts that occurred between March and June of 2020. During our mid-year budget update this February, we projected a $19 million deficit for this fiscal year, 2021. As we are getting closer to the end of the fiscal year, it looks like we are going to be pretty close to that number. We will get some assistance from the federal government, from the federal stimulus dollars, but that'll lower the deficit some, but it will not be substantial. Without any funds budgeted for the Pride event in 2022 or additional funding for community safety, we are projecting another deficit of $6.9 million in fiscal year 2022. So that's over $32 million budget deficit in the 3 years combined. We'll work hard towards not experience these actual deficit amounts, but these are the best estimates based on current conditions. So this chart provides a breakdown of the city's revenue sources. 75% of general fund revenue comes from taxes. Sales tax is the highest projected revenue generator in the adopted budget. This is due to the new sales tax revenue from the Measure E sales tax initiative that was approved by the West Hollywood voters last November. But it's also due to the uncertain recovery of transient occupancy tax that slowed during the pandemic. When we are back to fully budgeting TOT, I expect sales tax, property tax, and TOT to each represent about 20% of the budget. This chart displays the breakdown of the city's expenditure budget. The city is in the business of providing public service, and as such, a significant portion of our budget goes into the staff that provides those services, 38% in fiscal year 2020, 2022. That is our product. We don't make widgets or software or anything else. Our product is good public service. We are also a contract city, so the services we are unable to provide directly from city staff, we contract those out. That includes public safety and other contract services for another 36% of the budget. Financing is the debt service we pay on bonds that we issue for capital improvements. So it's actually 10% of our budget is general fund budget goes towards capital when you add the 1% for capital maintenance and the 9% for debt service. And we still budget about 6% of our general fund for social services contracts and other social services, which is extremely high for a city our size. So now I want to move on to the major priorities. In developing the city's budget, we focused on 4 major priorities: revenue recovery, expenditure restraint, key initiatives, and community support. And I'll touch on each of these areas. The revenue recovery. We are seeing the beginning of the recovery from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are still a year or 2 away from our pre-COVID revenues from the city's existing revenue sources. Fortunately, prior to the COVID-19 shutdown, about 15 months ago, the city worked diligently to find and implement new revenue sources. These new revenue sources are important to the long-term financial stability of the city, but they also will help us return to pre-COVID revenue totals sooner than most cities. These new major revenue sources include the Measure E sales tax increase, which is projected to be about $10 million of additional sales tax each year. The cannabis tax that is projected to produce about $5.5 million in annual revenue once all the cannabis businesses are open. The sunset arts and advertising program that will produce significant new revenue from development agreements once all the billboards are operating. We will also see significant revenues from digital media at city-owned properties like the Sunset Spectacular Billboard Project and on bus shelters and street furniture. There are also a number of new hotels that have recently come online or in the development process, and those will provide additional new revenue sources. So we are moving towards the recovery of revenues, but it will take some time. Expenditure restraint. This is predominantly a status quo budget. We implemented a number of cost-saving measures when we adopted the fiscal year 2021 budget. One of the major cost-saving measures implemented was we cut all of our department budgets by 20%. So that totaled about $20 million in overall cuts. We've maintained most of those reductions in the fiscal year 2022 budget, with some exceptions like cost of living increases for contracted social service providers. But over the next year, we'll take a close look at what services need to be added back in the fiscal year 2023 budget, instead of just returning that $20 million back to future budgets. We also froze the hiring of over 20 positions during COVID. We will slowly start hiring those positions that need to be staffed as we return to in-person services. But we will use this opportunity to review and adjust the organizational structure for greater efficiency over the next several months. Major events like Halloween and Pride also greatly impact the city's expenditure budget and are not included in the adopted budget. The city will evaluate these events for the future, starting with Pride in 2022. We are also reducing spending on capital maintenance in the last two budget cycles. This is another area that we will continue to evaluate for future increases to ensure our roads and infrastructure remains in the best possible and safest conditions. Key initiatives. We do continue to invest in city initiatives like community safety, social services, neighborhood livability, and community and capital improvements. The primary expenditure increase in the adopted budget is related to the West Hollywood Park Aquatics and Recreation Center. That project is expected to be completed in the fall and will be a substantial increase in the city's overall operations. There's also been a lot of discussion regarding community safety. While this budget does not include funding for additional public safety services, the City Council plans to have a comprehensive discussion regarding community safety in the coming months and is expected to increase funding to address community safety. We are also in the process of developing the city's housing element, which is a key component of the city's general plan and neighborhood livability. And then during this budget, we will also focus on several newer initiatives like diversity, equity, and inclusion training. There are several trainings planned for city staff, the city council, commissioners, and advisory boards that focus on these areas. We also plan to provide space and trainings for trainings and discussion regarding diversity, equity, inclusion for our residents and for the business communities in the coming year. We plan to complete the Vision 2050 strategic plan in this fiscal year. That process to develop a strategic plan was halted last year during the pandemic. We plan to start community outreach process to develop a long-term plan in the fall. Next is community support. The city is maintaining full funding for the provisions of social services to constituents in fiscal year 2020. We will also continue to expand COVID-19 related support to the community, such as rental assistance, housing related legal assistance, and grocery subsidies through the use of the city's emergency reserves. The city currently contracts with 9 organizations that provide outreach services in the community. Many of these organizations provide targeted services to people experiencing homelessness with unique needs, including those who are LGBTQ, those with mental health and substance abuse conditions, and those who are living with or at risk of HIV. In support of the members of the business community that are still suffering from the impacts of the COVID-19 restrictions in the past 15 months, the city is allowing additional time through the end of the calendar year for repayment of fees, taxes, and loans without penalties. In addition, this is in addition to the 50% reduction in the business license tax to be paid for calendar year 2020 that the council, excuse me, previously adopted earlier this year. And then finally, I'll conclude with the reopening of city facilities. This is the number one thing that each of us can do to help one another toward a speedy recovery is get vaccinated if you're able to. The city continues to follow the guidance of Los Angeles County Health Department and Cal OSHA as it relates to COVID-19 restrictions. As we continue to ensure the safety of our employees and the community, we are extremely cautious with the reopening of city facilities. We've started with having management staff working 50% in person and 50% remotely at the start of this month. The rest of the non-management staff will return to in-person work at 50% next week. We plan to open City Hall to the public by appointment only late next month, and we'll continue to monitor when it is safe to remove the appointment restrictions. This really relies on the number of COVID cases in the county continuing to remain low. There is the new Delta variant that is impacting many communities. The only way we can continue to maintain city facilities open and your businesses operating without COVID restrictions is to be safe and remember that we are still in this together. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank the city council members, Mayor Horvath, Mayor Pro Tem Meister, and council members D'Amico, Erickson, and Shine. Thank you for the opportunity to become the next city manager. As part of the interview process, I noted to the council members that I'm the youngest of 10 children, so I'm used to having a lot of bosses, but I'm looking forward to working with each of you, as well as each of you in the business community. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our staff who have worked very hard and diligently over the last 15 months, working from home and working in person, particularly those who did have to come in because their essential job duties required it, like our code compliance officers and our maintenance staff and facility staff. So I do thank you all. We will be doing a brief panel to talk about the reopening of businesses and the services and the extension of some of the services that we did provide during COVID. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, this past January, the city did do a report on the retrospective of the last year that was of COVID. And so I do encourage people to look at that. It does provide information on the services and how we adjusted at that time. And those things aren't going to go away completely. We will be providing in-person services, but we've also learned a lot over the last year, and we'll continue to provide some services in the ways that we've learned. But some of our team will talk a little more about that. I will now like to introduce Mott Smith, who's going to moderate the post-pandemic plan discussion. Mott is the CEO and co-founder of AMP Kitchens, the first large-scale multi-net kitchen developer and operator in the US, and principal of Civic Enterprise, an urban infill real estate development firm. He is a founding board member of the Council for Infill Builders and teaches in the Masters of Real Estate Development program and Ross Minority program in real estate at the USC Price School of Public Policy, which I also attended. So please help me in welcoming Mott Smith.
Hey, thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure to be hanging out with WeHo. And it's a bittersweet night saying goodbye to Paul. I just want to lend my voice to the many that have said what an incredible leader you've been. Your team has been empowered and innovative and accountable and effective. And that's not something that every city can say. And so I think we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. So thank you so much for everything you've done, and best of luck in the future. We'll see you around. It is a cliche to talk about how unprecedented the past year plus has been. Everybody has been struggling, and as often happens in struggles, we get bursts of creativity and problem solving and originality. And West Hollywood, as the creative city, has always been at the forefront of civic of civic entrepreneurship, you could say, and this time is no different. I know as recently as 2019, the WeHo Chamber, in conjunction with the City Council, Departments of Economic Development, Planning and Development, and the Business License Commission, started its small business initiative, and already began looking at creative ways to make the city more, to allow for more self-expression through small business, to allow for neighborhoods to be revitalized, to kind of ease some of the regulatory processes and to make neighborhoods stronger. And that was something that began even before the pandemic. And I know that when the pandemic hit, it kind of went into overdrive, and the city has had a series of executive orders, a commercial eviction moratorium, a third-party food delivery commission cap, a business resources and toolkit, a weekly COVID business and workforce newsletter. The city established a commercial mediation services program with the chamber. Very importantly, and centrally for what we're about to talk about tonight, established the Outzone program. You established a COVID-19 webinar series, partnered with Curative to provide testing to workers, participated in weekly meetings with the business sectors and leadership groups, created a toolkit to assist businesses to navigate through the pandemic, created small business workforce resources, web pages on the city website, et cetera, et cetera. And as we all know, the city's partnership with local businesses and the chamber is really unique. And I can say that as somebody who does business in many cities, that this is really a special place, and you can feel how much more effective governance is when it has this kind of relationship with the business community. As of June 15th, we're in a new world. The governor and the county eliminated most business capacity limits and masking requirements. And so there's a new urgency to help the small businesses that are reopening and are experiencing more patronage than they have forever. And today's panel discussion is going to focus on the shift from temporary relief measures to a more permanent structure. All at the same time accounting for a new vision of public space. And again, this is something that you started even before the pandemic, but really accelerated during the pandemic. So we've got two panelists tonight who everybody here knows. We've got our Planning and Development Services Director, John Kehoe, and Public Works Director, Jackie Rocco. These two departments have been charged with bringing forward the outdoor dining program based on the popularity of the city's temporary outdoor expansion program. And they've been charged with reimagining public spaces. So I think everybody here by now knows how to use chat on Zoom really, really well. So we'd love to encourage a dialogue. So please post questions in the chat if you have them. I'll keep an eye out for them. And we're going to start out with a short presentation by John and Jackie, and I'll ask a few questions, and then I'm going to go to the dialogue with everybody. We have a huge number of attendees, which is wonderful, with everybody in the chat. So John and Jackie, could you please tell us about your departments and your role during the pandemic? So John, why don't you take it first?
Sure. Thank you, Mott. It's great to be here. Thank you to the Chamber for having us. It's a great opportunity to speak to the business community that we serve. So I'm very appreciative of that. So I've been with the city for a while. Again, my name is John Kehoe. As a matter of fact, I've been here so long that Paul was just the finance director when I started with the city. And there was someone else called Charlie McKinney was the city manager back then. But fast forward, I was appointed to the director of the Planning and Services department in 2019. And for those who don't know exactly what that involves, the department includes the Long Range Planning Division, the Current and Historic Preservation Planning Division, and the Building and Safety Division. So we cover all the activities that most businesses are involved in. So we're in intimate relationships with the business community and the Chamber of Commerce. As we've all been talking about, this last year really threw us all for a loop. Everybody had to change on a dime. My department was really about meeting with people face to face, whether it's in community meetings or with developers and business people working on their plans. So of course, all that went out the window and we had to learn how to do all that online. And so I think we've pretty successfully been able to transition to an online version. We're now doing all of our project review online. We've created new ways for the community to participate virtually in meetings. But we are really looking forward to coming back into City Hall and being able to meet one-on-one with people in person. Because I think that's really critical for us in our department to meet with people, be on the streets, know who the business operators are, know what's going on in the community. But that being said, we're still going to maintain some of our new technology that we've done as far as online services, because I think that's also a great opportunity for people to be able to quickly communicate with us. If they're not in West Hollywood, they can communicate with us from other places. So it's going to be a new world when we can have both in-person and online services. So that's just a quick, brief introduction, then I'll turn over to Jackie and we can continue our conversation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jackie Rocco. I'm the Director of Public Works. I'm honored to be here this evening and great to see so many familiar faces. I have been with the city for 13 years and I have had the great fortune of working with most, if not all, of our businesses. I mean, I've had a great opportunity when I started as the parking manager and then moving on to economic development and now back at Public Works. And Oscar's urging to come back to Public Works. And as you know, Public Works, the department is comprised of 3 divisions. It is the code compliance, engineering, and parking services divisions. And all 3 of these divisions work very closely with the business community. And during this pandemic, they have been very actively involved, especially our code compliance division. They are essential workers, and all throughout this time, although many of us were able to make the transition to work remotely, our code compliance staff, they were out in the community every single day, working with our businesses, communicating new regulations that, as you know, were constantly changing as this pandemic was evolving, and both the state and LA County Department of Public Health were issuing new orders. So our code compliance division was extremely busy, but engineering as well, as we started working with programs to help the business community. They were also very deeply involved in working with our partners, in particular John's division, as well as our parking division. And we had the good opportunity to collaborate. I mean, I think many of you will agree that this pandemic has presented many challenges for the business community and our community in general. But it has also presented opportunities in terms of implementing new technology and introducing efficiencies to help our business community, even while we were working remotely, and introducing efficiencies across departments and divisions so that we could provide better service. Because after all, our mission is we are public servants. We're here to serve the public. And while we have been working really effectively remotely, we are anxious to get back. I mean, I've been back at City Hall. I've seen some familiar faces around and gone out to lunch and dinner, and it's great to be back. And we're glad to be here this evening with you, and also to talk about some of the programs that we've implemented during the pandemic and the vision for the future for our community.
Yeah, I think one thing we wanted just to let the business community know was how we worked together to come up with the Outzone program and all of those. We worked intimately, as Jackie mentioned, working constantly trying to figure out how we can come up with new rules and new regulations. What should we pay attention to as we try to address the pandemic and the health concerns? And what were things that we could just, okay, we're just not going to pay attention to those things right now because we're in an emergency. And so we had to have really serious conversation amongst ourselves about what things are important and what things aren't important as we went about this. And as everyone knows, we worked closely with the city attorney's office to develop executive orders that Paul would sign that would allow us to do certain things. And then there were other items that only our city council could do. And so those were urgency ordinances. So there's a lot of that going on. Ultimately, we did come up with a plan that allowed for businesses that weren't allowed to operate inside but could operate outside, with a way for them to try to recapture their occupancy by moving outside. And now we'll show a few slides. I think Paulo, if he's online. So we created this is going to just be a short few slides. We created something called the out zones. And so next slide, please. So this is an example of a business that took advantage of it. We all probably know Connie and Ted's. That's the parking lot in front of Connie and Ted's. And so they immediately took that over and turned it into a great outdoor dining space. And so we know that they've even since then have enclosed that space to make it more of an all-weather place. But this was one of the things that we did through our executive orders and urgency ordinances. We waived parking requirements. We said we don't have any more parking requirements and allowed for businesses to just immediately take over the parking spaces. Next slide, please. So this is another program that we came up with, and this is where the city partnered with the business community. The city brought in K-rails, and the K-rails are those concrete devices that provide the protection. Normally we see them in the middle of freeways, but here we have it on the side of our street. And so that allowed us to allow businesses to open outdoor dining on the sidewalks and then expand into the public parking spaces. And Jackie, you might want to talk about, what we did about the public parking spaces.
Yes, this has been a really effective and welcome opportunity for businesses that where once the restrictions were put in place where restaurants could not operate indoors, we had to look at the public space. How do we help these businesses expand their footprint outdoors so they can continue to operate and be in business? And how do we reimagine our open spaces like our sidewalks and on-street parking spaces? And in this example that John is presenting here, this K-rail was installed and removed the on-street parking spaces so that the restaurants were able to move their tables and chairs onto this space so they could expand their footprints. In some cases, some restaurants were able to replicate almost 100% of their dining space. And this K-rail provides the protection. It's traffic rated, so if a car loses control, God forbid, the patrons that are sitting here enjoying the outdoors are fully protected. But we did this primarily along Santa Monica Boulevard, as well as some areas of Sunset and Melrose, where we removed close to 100 spaces, somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 on-street parking spaces, so that these spaces could be provided for our restaurants to expand their footprint onto the street parking spaces.
And I think we have one more slide, Paul. Yeah, so this is another example of a business that expanded temporarily into their parking lot. So this shows that some businesses really went to great lengths to really make that outdoor dining experience the same as, or if not better than, sometimes being inside of a space. And so this type of, so one thing that we did for this type of project was we looked at this from a different point of view than we typically would from a building and safety standpoint. So, if we had to require normal building permit for all this, it would have had to go through a fairly lengthy review process. We knew people didn't have time for that. People wanted to move things quickly. So we looked at this as a temporary structure. So that allowed us to speed things up through the process, but that also has some implications for moving forward on a permanent basis. But this also just demonstrated how great people can be when it comes to like let's move things outside and create something really exciting. So, there are all these things that, oh, and then here's some other examples. Non-restaurants, we have examples of fitness being on roofs, or exercise areas outside. Those have been both positive, and sometimes people working out have been a little bit noisy for some neighbors, but it's all interesting because we haven't allowed this type of activity outside in the past. And this might be something we want to look at in the future. And here's another example of where we waived our parking requirements to let people occupy parking spaces. So there's a lot of things that we did on a temporary basis that now we're going to have to take a look at as the pandemic comes to an end. How do we unwind and undo the executive orders and urgency orders, and how do we transition into the new world that's going to be different than what we saw before?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note that, we were moving really quickly when, we started rolling out these out zones. And like John says, to begin to move to a more permanent phase, the temporary phase, we overlooked or relaxed a lot of, permits and requirements that typically go into, more permanent structures. And that is why, as we begin to move into this post-pandemic phase to help our business community, get back to the new normal, we will be, joined at the hip, guiding them through this process, holding workshops and, opportunities to help them understand, why some of these, processes are needed. Because, for example, in the public right-of-way, we don't think of this much, but, the public right-of-way, meaning sidewalks and streets, roads, they serve a purpose. It's not only for a sidewalk for us to walk on top, but there's a whole infrastructure beneath that, the sidewalks and the streets that have, power lines, that have, communications lines, sewers and so forth. And, we don't get to see all of that, but there's a lot going on under those structures that need to be accessible. So, because accidents occur and maintenance is required and upgrades are required. And that's why, as we begin to talk about the next phase, we need to also look at, how do we look at this public space? How do we re-envision it, but still allow for, the maintenance and support of our infrastructure to work in harmony with our business community.
All right. So, John and Jackie, this again was kind of a forced experiment that caused you to step on the gas and make a lot of stuff happen very quickly. And I'm already seeing in the chat here some high praise for what you've done and how great it's been for the life of West Hollywood, bringing people back to work, creating a great environment for people to dine and socialize safely. What would you guys like to see going forward? What would the city like to see going forward?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. I think a lot of that expanded outdoor dining is something that almost everybody likes. I really haven't heard anyone saying, we don't like being able to enjoy a meal outside. So I think that's definitely one. I think what's really interesting, we've always had outdoor dining in West Hollywood, at least in my time here, we've had outdoor dining. And one thing that we did deliberately way back in the day was expand the sidewalks on the west side of town where there was room to make sure that we could have a more robust public realm that included more outdoor dining. And that was successful. And then more recently, we started tiptoeing into the world of parklets. And so we had a couple parklets built on in a couple of locations, and those were privately run outdoor areas, but there was some hesitancy from a lot of the community on those things when they first started. But now with COVID, I think people are more accepting of looking at public space in a little bit different ways. So I think I'm happy about that. I think that's an exciting thing.
Jack, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, this has been a great opportunity for us to reimagine, those public spaces. Again, that the sidewalks have been seen as just, having one purpose, to walk on them, and, on street parking, to park vehicles. And, and those are important. They do serve an important mission in our city. But I think this has also given us an opportunity to reimagine and re-envision how public spaces are used in a way that can support, these business goals and objectives, as well as maintaining the infrastructure that supports the city.
Yeah. And I again, bringing more the experience in from other cities where people have sort of been terrified of some of these creative solutions for years and years and years. And again, West Hollywood's been a leader in making this stuff happen, but it's kind of nice to see some of these things happen and that the sky didn't fall. And in fact, it kind of worked pretty well. And it gives you a lot of freedom to continue experimenting. Still, there are challenges now in ending some of these urgency ordinances and executive orders. We can do a lot of things in an emergency that require more of a deliberate process on a permanent basis. Could you talk a little bit about what the challenges are in shifting from this urgency/emergency paradigm to a more permanent one?
Sure. So that's one thing that, we have a team of folks at City Hall made up of public works, building and planning and building and safety, code compliance, you name it. We have all the people actively involved in this, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to kind of move on to the next phase. So I would like to show just a couple more slides to show some of the issues, and we can talk about them. So we talked about expanded outdoor dining. So during the pandemic, people really weren't out and about too much. And we were really, in restaurants and businesses were limited on their interior capacity. So we just said they could expand out onto the sidewalk public space as much as they wanted to, as long as we kept a minimum space for ADA passage. Well, now that we're going back into a more hopefully vibrant time, well, there's going to be more people on the sidewalk and people using it for other purposes. So this is just an example to show that during the pandemic, we really limited space on the sidewalk for people other than those in the businesses. And so this is going to be a really fun conversation for us to have, is what's the vision for the sidewalks, especially where we have wider sidewalks. How much of the sidewalk should we dedicate to pedestrians who are just walking back and forth, people who have mobility issues that want to move on the sidewalk, versus allowing businesses to expand. And as Jackie can point out, there's a lot of utilities on the sidewalks that we're kind of like not looking too closely at during the pandemic that we need access to, and so how does the fire department access the buildings if we have all these outdoor dining areas on the sidewalks? Next slide. So here's another one, a business that wanted to make sure there was a place that was, kind of protected from the weather. And so they created a space that totally enclosed the sidewalk. And so in essence, when people are on the public sidewalk, they're actually they're in a private business when they walk through this. And so we have all different versions of this now in our public rights of way, where people have created, great places for people to dine, but it's certainly changed the urban design appearance of the community. It's changed, how people can see the buildings from the street, from the sidewalks. It's changed, police and fire might have concerns about how the fronts of buildings are no longer readily visible. So this is something that we'll need to take care of. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a staff report to our city council later this summer. It'll probably be in at least two parts, where we'll bring it to the council at one meeting as a receive and file, and then have a discussion later where staff is going to propose a path for us on the various topics that we should address and how staff believes we should address it. And I know one of the key things that we have to talk about is the timeline on all of this, because some of these things might require actual regulatory changes for us to accomplish. Other things might not, but how long would that take? And so how long do we want to allow business to be continuing to operate as they are now while we go through this process? Is it a year from now, a year and a half from now? So I think that's all what the discussion is going to be, is what's the vision for the city in the future and how long do we think we'll get there? And I know Jackie has a lot to say about that.
Well, I think, well, that is true. And I think, as it's the case in, so many of the things that we have to address, is it's about achieving a balance. We have to maintain access, to this infrastructure that is critical to the city. But we also then need to identify resources that can help the community. But when we're having to balance these two, oftentimes we run into some conflicts. And I'll give you an example. For example, we took some of those on-street parking spaces that created these great expanded outdoor dining areas. But in removing those parking spaces, we eliminated some commercial loading zones. We removed, opportunities for a lot of these, food delivery services that were a major lifeline to some of our restaurants in the most critical early stages of the pandemic, where, no one could come and dine in those restaurants, but they were, staying alive and maintaining that connection to their customers through these delivery services. So if we remove every parking space on the street, then we lose the opportunity for some of that. And then as we begin to come back, one of the things that, we have a fabulous city where people love to come and party, and we want that. One of the things that has been fabulous during this process, in the city as well, is the rise and popularity of ride sharing. So people can come and party and drink and have a great time, and they don't have to drive to the city. Well, again, if we take all the on-street parking spaces and we don't designate some areas for these services to take place, then that creates some conflict. So, the challenge for us going forward is, looking at areas, maybe we have to define zones so that we can achieve that balance, and working in collaboration with John's department and with the chamber and the business community. Then we begin to look at, what are the services? What is the right combination of services that can, still support the business community so that their deliveries can be made, so that ride sharing companies can drop off and pick up their customers so they can party safely, and, and we still have access to the infrastructure. So that's going to be an interesting and maybe a little bit challenging, but fun and creative and innovative at the same time as we envision this new future.
So that's sort of the immediate stuff. What do you see beyond that? What's kind of your long-term vision for the public realm and how it's changing?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think number one, I think we need to, my department needs to make sure we're flexible. We need to make sure that we're open to new things that are happening in the business community and being able to respond to that. For instance, there might be some long-term changes that we need to look at, for instance, in home occupations. If people are going to be working from home more, we need to find out what those home occupations are, and do our regulations address home occupations. Parking requirements for businesses. We need to look at, and our council has already directed us to look at that. So we're looking at parking regulations and how we might want to change those that might help businesses. For instance, one possible solution might be to eliminate parking requirements to get altogether for a greater amount of outdoor dining than what currently exists. And that would allow these businesses to more quickly move to the out area, to the out zone areas. And then another issue that obviously we're considering is, if it's true that people are working from home and there might not be as much need for office space, what happens to some of our office buildings? Do some of our office buildings ultimately get converted to something else? Should we look at our rules and regulations? But we've worked with the chamber on their small business initiatives, and so we need to make sure we continue to partner with the chamber to look at ways to modify things to make sure that we can help our businesses thrive here in the city. So those are just a few things. I'm sure there's a laundry list of items that we can continue to go over, but I don't want to just dominate right at the moment.
Jackie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think John touched on a lot of these, changing land uses. I think that's the one thing we've learned through this pandemic, that as people were forced to, go home and work from home, it also created opportunities for creativities, and people, even started new businesses, side hustles, to, augment their income or supplement their income. But those have been really creative and new ways of looking at, how, businesses start and thrive in, whatever, our post-pandemic business environment will be. And I think those are the things that we need to look at. One of the, and again, it's full of opportunities and challenges, because as more people are home and, they're working from home, they're more aware of noises, of, disturbances from construction. Construction was considered essential during the pandemic, so it never shut down. But when you're home all day long on Zoom and Teams calls, and you're homeschooling your children and all that, there's just a lot of things happening in the city. So we need to look at, our noise regulations. I mentioned earlier, our code enforcement officers were out day and night. They work 7 days a week. And these are the things that we look at as we begin to explore more opportunities for outdoor activities, whether it's, rooftops at hotels where they can have, old tennis courts that are no longer being used, and they want to convert those to new uses to have, some kind of outdoor space. That along with that, a lot of our commercial areas are in very close proximity, if not immediately abutting residential areas. So how do we achieve that right balance and that harmony so that the businesses can thrive and have these exciting new business models, but that our residents are also, protected and are able to, have peace and tranquility at the same time?
Mott, you mentioned the vision for the future. So I think the most exciting part of this is actually talking about the vision for the public realm, like the public sidewalks. What is that vision? I've noticed in the chat, some people have asked about disability access, and how bikes and bus stops interrelate into this. And I think those are all real key questions. The balancing act between expanded business activity on the sidewalk versus, mobility issues, and then it also could be, if we do, and most likely there will be some expanded outdoor dining, but how does that outdoor dining expansion take place? Is that outdoor dining expansion all up against the building, and then the pedestrians are moved to the edge of the sidewalks? Do we have it to where the pedestrian path is down the middle of the sidewalk with outdoor dining on either side? There's all different versions of that. And so I think that's an exciting thing that our urban design staff is probably going to help us really pay attention to. And it might be there's different ways of looking at that. Maybe on the west end of Santa Monica might be different than how we look at it on Sunset versus the east end of Santa Monica, because the different locations in West Hollywood all have different configurations. Some areas, the sidewalks are very limited. So how are we going to manage that? And Sunset has a different vibe than Santa Monica. So I think that's going to be one of the, it's going to be a challenge, but it's kind of one of those fun challenges, because you're actually, because this is going to, ultimately be the vision of the city's rights of way for a good time into the future. It's something that we really want to make sure we try to get right. Is it expanding sidewalks or putting in parklets? So it's going to be an interesting time.
I like that, John, as an accidental slogan for your program, for a good time, into the future. There you go. You can have it. Could you and Jackie both talk a little bit about what all of us can look forward to as kind of a forum and a process for thinking about some of these urban design visions and how that's going to roll out and how we're going to solve these problems?
Sure. And part of that's going to hopefully our council will help us provide what sort of outreach that we're going to have. So our item is going to propose, there's going to be a bunch of different things. So some are going to have outreach on this is our recommendation, of course, obviously the city council are the decision makers here, but we would propose that there would be outreach on various items. I think we want to work really closely with the business community and the business operators, and probably have special meetings just with the restaurateurs, so we can, get into, more detailed as to what is changing and what they may or may not have to do moving forward. But I'm sure we'll have some really important meetings with the business community. But if we're having some broader ones, like for instance, the council has asked us to look at how we can help the hotel industry with rooftop activities. So those are probably going to be zoning changes. So those will probably require public meetings, probably informational meetings, meetings at the Planning Commission and the City Council, when we talk about changes to the rooftop, whether or not we want to modify height limits or roof occupancy to allow for added restrooms on rooftops. So, you know, hopefully the ABC will make some of their rules permanent to allow for takeout alcohol and various things like that. And so if they do, then we would also want to make those changes in our regulations and go through a public process to let everyone understand what changes might be taking place.
Awesome. Jackie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, you know, this is going to be an ongoing process. Obviously, it can't be, you know, a one size fits all, and it's going to be different, as John mentioned, in different areas of the city. So I think that's going to be the exciting part, you know, to have, you know, working sessions, you know, study groups, and, you know, by industry, by region, because that will give us a better sense of, you know, what makes sense in what areas of the city. I mean, I think, you know, the idea of outdoor dining is exciting, but that could be achieved in different ways, depending on, you know, the area of the city and what kind of infrastructure may be providing limitations in some areas that are not present in others. So I think that process is going to be ongoing as the changes or, you know, the guidance is given, you know, from council. We will begin that process. I mean, Genevieve has been a really important partner in this endeavor in getting, you know, the members of the chamber really engaged in this process and, you know, giving us ideas and suggestions, recommendations. She has a Friday meeting that, you know, a lot of us in the city attend to hear, you know, what the concerns are and how we begin to move forward with the next stages. So that process is going to continue, and we're going to be working very closely together.
Nice. So we've got exactly 3.5 minutes left. I want to make sure we cover a couple of questions here from our attendees. I think you sort of touched on this before, but I'm going to combine two questions into one. One from William West Siegmiller and another from Gerard Wright. And they are about, I'm sorry, from you all, Dor, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, about making sure there's disabled access on the sidewalks. And also how the interface with bikes and bus stops have been, and whether you've heard from cyclists or Metrobus operators / passengers about either they're enjoying the changes or having concerns about some of the changes that have been made in the space.
Well, you know, I think overwhelmingly the feedback has been very positive. I mean, I think, you know, both the businesses and the community have given us feedback in terms of really enjoying and welcoming and embracing these opportunities, because otherwise we would have just been shut down, right? I mean, if we had not made these options available, and that would not have been good for our community. So overwhelmingly, it's been positive. There have been some areas of challenge, no doubt about that. And we have worked through that. I mean, the businesses that have also implemented these outdoor zones, they understand the need for, you know, ADA access, and to have, you know, that kind of structure in place. So they have spent considerable resources to build, you know, decking that is leveled with sidewalks, and in some areas, you know, having, you know, where they perhaps would have wanted to expand, we're not able to do so because we needed to maintain the integrity of those spaces. There have been some challenges in areas where, you know, we've had people riding bicycles or other devices on sidewalks and coming into conflict with employees, particularly when they're moving across from their space onto the on-street space because they have to cross the sidewalk to get to those spaces. But I think overwhelmingly the designs, the business owners took great care to understand that, you know, these requirements are in place for a reason because it makes accessibility possible.
Right on.
I would just
go ahead, John.
Add on to that our city council likes to challenge staff to be very creative. And so one of the things that they've tasked us to do is to look at also look at adding bike lanes to Santa Monica Boulevard. And so that's going to be something we'll be, you know, in addressing that issue, is looking at how can we try to accomplish multiple goals in the same space of providing more outdoor activity for people who you know, might want to eat at a restaurant or something like that, as well as trying to address the concerns of our bicycle community.
Very cool. We've got 45 seconds. So I'm going to ask this last question from Andrew Campbell, where he says, I know the Robertson weekend closure has been controversial. However, I just returned from Denver and visited their Larimer Square area with the street closed and lots of outdoor dining and street energy. Will that be something the city will be exploring for the future, perhaps on Robertson or another area?
The answer is, we have been working, very diligently to make, this work. And one of the things that I will let, folks know, that some that may not be aware, including you, Mott, but, we have a design district streetscape project that is starting, in August with undergrounding of utilities in the design district. And this will take place from the city limit to the east at Croft to Doheny, and primarily along Melrose and Robertson, Lapeer, and Almont. And that project is going to bring about a lot of these amenities and these qualities to this outdoor, in the sense that the project, once we have all the utilities undergrounded, we're also expanding sidewalks, we're repaving our streets, we're going to be adding all new lighting, new landscape, and it's going to make the whole area very inviting. It's going to be transformative. It's going to create some opportunities for, some of these ideas we've been talking about. So I would say stay tuned to, the area of the design district on the west end of the city, because this is going to be a major project. It's going to be going on for the next 4 years. So I know that there's going to be a lot of interaction with us and the business community, because this will, be impacting them. But I'm here to tell you that when that project is completed, this is just going to be a really fabulous, completely transformed part of the city that the business community will embrace and will have, these qualities. I think with any project, anything that's new, it takes time to, embrace it and to work through some of those challenges. But I think I just encourage everyone to keep the dialogue going and to keep, providing ideas and working with us so that we can continue to explore these, creative and exciting opportunities for our city.
All right, Jackie, that's a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much to you and you, John. I'd like to hand it back to incoming city manager David Wilson. Before I do, as a completely disinterested, neutral fanboy of urban stuff, I just want to give a big shout out to you, Jackie, and you, John, your team and all your colleagues at the city. You guys are really a very unusual place in the world. In your ideas, your solutions orientation, and the way you work together with each other in City Hall, and the way you work with the business community, the residential community. So I really want to thank you guys for doing what you're doing. And with that, back to you, David.
Thank you, Mott, and thank you, John and Jackie, for your insight on to what the future of the city and the new normal can look like. So I did want to take a few minutes to talk about someone. So the good and the bad part about announcing your retirement 3 months before you actually retire, there are many opportunities for others to say goodbye and celebrate your years of service, whether you want to hear it or not. So I've been careful not to say any goodbye speeches to Paul over the last few weeks, maybe in hopes that he changes his mind and stay. But now that we are a week away from his retirement date, it looks like that is less and less likely to happen. And I'd be remiss not to say a few words about my friend and colleague, Paul Arevalo, tonight. And I call him my friend and colleague because he told me to. Well, what he actually said is the best thing I could ever call him is my friend and colleague. And he didn't tell me that when I became the assistant city manager or a member of the executive team as finance director, or 5 or even 10 years ago. He told me that 20 years ago when I was a junior project manager in the housing and redevelopment department, and he was still city manager at that time. But he's been the best of friends and the best of colleagues since that time. And we've been through many good times and hard times over the years. And we've come up with some really creative solutions, always for the betterment of the city and this community, particularly the business community. And I learned what I know about public service and getting to win-win solutions from Paul's mentorship. And so although you're retiring, I hope you do stay connected with the profession and continue to do the future city manager workshops, because there are a lot of young, talented people that will be the future of the city management profession. Not like the old guys like me, but really young guys and gals and people that will really need your mentorship and guidance. They need you to teach them how successful cities can be run, and that it takes decades to solve city problems and not days. And so it is truly my honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Paul Arevalo. Now I think he left. He's not even in the building. There he is.
Yeah, that sucked, David. I didn't expect that. Let's see. All right, so I unmuted myself. That sucked, David. I didn't think that was coming, so you caught me by surprise. I do have a box of tissues, but more importantly, I told everyone on the business development call earlier this week that I was going to have a glass of Macallan's, but instead I have my trusty Sierra Nevada. But more important, a tribute to Brad Burlingame, Go Clippers, and I'll be at the game tomorrow night. It's been an amazing ride. I can't tell you how fortunate I am to have been working for such an amazing community. And I'm going to try to quickly go down memory lane. It's 3 decades worth of information. And if there's secrets to be told, I'm not going to tell them today. That will take that bottle of Macallan's to get that out of me. But I started in West Hollywood back in 1990. I was an assistant finance director for the city of Bell Gardens, and I was looking for opportunities to grow. My then city manager, Dave Bass, wasn't going anywhere soon. So I started looking for opportunities. There was an opportunity. This is this kind of crazy, high profile city that was really quirky that just had incorporated a few years earlier. I interviewed for the finance manager position and they offered me the job. And truly, in my mind, I was just passing through. I was going to be here for a few years. I was going to help shore up a bureaucracy and create financial policies, help them close their books. They've never closed their books. They never had a fully adopted and developed budget. So it was just going to be a fun time for me. I had my eyes on becoming a finance director in the city of Pasadena. So that was my goal. The 1990s West Hollywood City Hall was completely different, extremely informal. The first person you would meet when you walked into the building was Rick Brooks, and Rick Brooks was this creative, flamboyant, lovable guy who was just there to serve and welcome the community. I remember working with accounts payable, and the way we did accounts payable back then was someone would just initial a receipt, put it on the accounts payable clerk, and it just got magically paid. There was no backup or any documentation. This is back when we were located at the Trader Joe's location on Santa Monica next to the Ramada. And they were magical times. I think we had less than 50 employees and everybody knew everybody. While it was wonderful and fun and exciting, it was also right at the height of the ravages of the AIDS pandemic. And the community was reeling, and City Hall reflected that as well. We had employees on a regular basis dealing with the struggles of AIDS. I first got involved with Kenny Poe, and I helped be his caretaker. And that's when my job became more of a job, and it became more of a family, and just interacting with staff at a different level and learning from people that there's more to being at work than just working. And that has shaped my career. It's shaped who I am, and it's helped shape the culture of the organization, or I think the culture helped shape me. So that was my first experience while being in the city of West Hollywood. The 1999 was a pivotal year for me. I had established myself in the finance profession. I had a good statewide reputation. I was a board member for the California, was it the California Municipal Finance Organization? And just really, I was prominent in that area. However, one of these life-changing calls was, I think it was August 17th, 1999. We had a pre-meeting prepping for the council meeting. I didn't have any items on the agenda, so I was driving home, and I got a call from closed session from then council member John Heilman asking me to come back to the closed session. So the closed session was over at Plummer Park. We had the old Sky Room, which was kind of a funky little room next to the council chamber, which was the auditorium or basketball courts. And I drove back, and Councilmember Heilman outside of the room told me that the council was informed that the then city manager was leaving, and they asked me to sit in for the city manager that night at the council meeting. And I've been doing that for nearly 22 years. Going from finance director to city manager was jumping from the frying pan into the fire. It was a controversial time. We had major community and business activities happening, especially on the public works side. We had some controversies inside City Hall, which just seemed to come back every 5 years or so. I decided this is what I want to do. If I was ever going to be city manager, this is the city I want to do it. It's something that I could give heart and soul to, and I've been doing it for 22 years. The team back then on the director level, and I really needed to lean heavily into them. And David, you're going to have to do the same with your executive team. You know, some of the names that I recall and I remember and that were there for me 24/7. You know, obviously Ray Reynolds, everybody knows Ray from the business community, you know, vision, articulate and loving guy. Joan English, who every time I stepped out of line would kick me in the ass. Lloyd Long, who was just kind of a casual influence, who provided me that quiet psychological support during the day when things got super stressful. And then, of course, Mike Jenkins, who is and was the best city attorney in the United States. He became a friend and mentor, and I really appreciate everything he offered me. Some of the challenges that we had early on in my career, and this is as I'm cutting my teeth as city manager, we're just diving into the East Side redevelopment, working with a real creative team and kind of wrestling with some of the businesses to acquire property. We ended up with the Gateway project, which was an amazing investment for the city and an amazing success. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the lasting results and additions that we got from that particular project. We had controversial projects, wrestling with the developer on the Millennium Project, and also some easier projects like the Pacific Design Center on the third phase. From the development side, I was able to make friends with some of the business community and the representatives. But to me, in terms of land use advisement, John Altschul was always there as kind of that fatherly figure, helping me stay on the rails as we, debated some of the more controversial issues. Earlier tonight, we gave a salute and tribute to Steve Afriet. Steve Afriet, when I first met him, he was kind of a politico and a little bit of a pain in the ass. But as I learned to know him and spend time with him, I really respected who he was. He was a big man with a big heart. We have kind of this fearsome foursome. There were four of us who would get together on a regular basis for lunch, and we'd sneak off campus and go to the Tam O'Shannon. It was really led by Jeff Seymour, Jim Arnone, Steve Afriet, myself. And I thought I would get all this political insight while we were sitting there having lunch because we were away from everybody. But what I learned most about Steve was about his relationship with his mom and about his family and his background. And all the dirt that they knew about never came up. But Steve, I'll do a quick toast to Steve as I have my beer here. You'll be missed, and you've been a great influence on the city of West Hollywood and all the people who worked with you and loved you. But I have to say, most significantly, as I said, frying pan to fire when I first became city manager, was the Santa Monica Boulevard reconstruction project. That project, if there's one defining moment other than incorporation, it was the revisioning and redevelopment of that boulevard. For those of us old enough to remember what the boulevard looked like, it was just one pothole after another. It was like you were in a third world country. The state didn't take care of it. We went through a lengthy process to take over the boulevard. The state gave us $9 million to fund the improvements. We spent $30 million because that's what West Hollywood does. And it became this, nationally recognized and award-winning pedestrian project. But it wasn't easy. Again, this was like building to building. So the sidewalks went out, the street went out, new infrastructure, the old rail tracks went out. And one of the things I talked to folks about, especially incoming newer city managers, is never miss an opportunity to put a volunteer between you and a difficult situation. And for me, that was Russ Wilson. And Russ was impacted just as much, if not more, than any business on Santa Monica Boulevard. I think we met, it seemed like on a daily basis. And he would be one of these ombudsman persons who would go out and speak the truth on what we're doing and how we're trying to implement the project. And from that, Russ became a business friend, and more importantly, he's best friend for life. And Russ, I thank you for the times then, and I thank you for the times now, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the Clipper game. 2010, as I'm going through decades as opposed to years, because I don't think anyone wants to hear my 30 years of history. After the first decade, I think I established and started to feel comfortable with who I was as a city manager. Again, it was something that I never thought I wanted to be. It wasn't something that I went to school to be. And when I was early in my government career, I would think you got to be a fool to be a city manager. But I ended up, after a few years saying, okay, I kind of got this thing. And it was going through city manager conferences and some of the networking where all of a sudden I realized I was starting to be the old guy in the room. So as I worked to give back to the industry, I also recognized it was time to start changing my focus in the organization, and that it is time to really build the next generation of leaders in the city of West Hollywood. During that last 10 years, I've really had some fantastic times looking at working with staff, building capacity, working with an amazing team, working with an amazing council. And I also had some difficult times too. I am the only council member I know that had to testify in front of a, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the term for it. Just a very unfriendly grand jury. That was one of my worst days being city manager. I can laugh at it now. It wasn't funny then. And The beer isn't enough for me to tell you what it was about, but it was quite an experience. But for me in life and for me in working in the organization, the good is always outweighed the bad or awkward things. And I kind of repeat the same thing over and over. I sound like my dad, but in life and in this organization, sometimes the days are really, really long, but the years go by super fast and the decades go by faster. And being here in this organization, it's just been amazing to watch the transformation of a city. And I've been fortunate with that. In the last 10 years, we've seen some major development in the city, and I applaud the development community for that. My screen just timed out, so I'm just assuming you can see me. And I'm going to hit this in case it didn't. I'm sorry.
We can see it.
Oh, you can't? Okay, I just can't see the screen. Great. Okay, so with that in the last 10 years, we saw amazing development, whether it was the Millennium Project finally being completed. We had the additional transformation of the east side with a lot of the new beautifully designed residential projects. The library project got built, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll have the ribbon cutting and opening of the new aquatic center. We have beautiful hotels, the Addition, the One Hotel, the Kimpton on the Pier, the Pendry. We just have a lot of major development. Even some of our historic sites, like the lot, the studio, we built new creative office space there. We're now the home of owned or Oprah Winfrey's headquarters. These are just amazing things that have occurred in the city, and it all started slowly. And I want to go back when I got here. West Hollywood was West Holly weird. We were the experiment that was supposed to fail miserably. Everything you heard from the county and all of the critics is that we didn't have the resources or wherewithal to run a city. And yet you look at how we've thrived over the years. It's just, we failed spectacularly. I mean, it's just amazing. The past 14 to 16 months has been really a challenge for all of us. We've been through these types of issues before. And I thank the business community for allowing me to lean heavily into you. I really needed your advice, your wisdom, and support to help guide policies to create a system that allows you to be successful. One of the things I just have to do the shout out, Jen, you've been amazing through all of this, and Nick and all of the board's been great on the staff level and ground level. Tara, Paulo, Janet, and Janet for a whole bunch of other things, but just for business purposes, I really thank all of you for your long hours, your focus, for pushing the envelope. And going back to the presentation earlier, it's really important that we continue to push the envelope and allow ourselves to make mistakes and not be in a gotcha mode. I think that there's a whole lot of great talent and great ideas, and we just need to be willing to explore and to take risks on getting things done. And if you fail, we should just pat people on the back for trying and not criticize them and just say, go off to the next thing. We just don't want to stifle the creativity. Right now we can rethink, as John and Jackie talked about earlier. What do we do with public spaces, open spaces, parking spaces? Are there better ways to utilize those and make them more available to the community? The pandemic has told us one thing, is that fresh air is really good. And that's going to be a trend that's going to last for decades. And I think we need to capitalize it in a beautiful city like West Hollywood and leverage that as much as possible. I also think it's time to look at rethinking and reprogramming some of the large scale events for the city. And I really encourage the community and the council to look at that. We spend millions, not hundreds of thousands. We spend millions of dollars to promote these events. And while some of them have high returns, some of them are just high risk and low return. And it's a chance to rethink those before we go back into the old way. It's a time to embrace technology. It's okay that people work remotely. We need to socialize. We're social animals, but it's so much easier and cheaper to build technology links than it is to build lanes on the freeway. And I hope that one of the silver linings to this pandemic is that we welcome a hybrid system, not only for West Hollywood City Hall, but for all of our businesses that can accommodate that. I think it's really important. Lastly, we're having conversations about reinventing police work and reinventing public safety to community safety. I think it's a great idea. It's a novel idea that can occur. I think West Hollywood can and should be a leader in that conversation. And the reason I say that is because we've been doing that for 36 years. We've invested in social service programs. As we've enhanced our public safety resources over the last decade, they've been for non-sworn personnel. There are models that work, and the model we have is something that should be built upon as we look at capturing and working with different types of programs. We also need to make sure the infrastructure is there. And I know there's a county seat that's going to be open up in a couple of years, and there's a whole bunch of qualified people running for it. And I have to remain objective because that's part of my code of conduct for ICMA. But the county needs to, pick up their load, and they have not been. They've been dumping it on municipalities. They've been dumping it on us, and it's not fair. And hopefully a change is coming, and resources will be redirected in that area. As I leave, I recognize that there's certain tensions in the community. I saw some of the questions that popped up during the chat earlier. It's really important that dialogue remains. One of the things that was the most important safety net to me when I became city manager was having a group of leaders in the community with strong objective voices to help guide me and to help mentor me and to help coach me, but also to help advocate good policy with the city leaders. And as we struggle with particular issues, the relationships have to be resilient enough to survive those particular issues. And as we debate things, it has to be a debate about facts and about challenges with issues and not about people. And I really hope that that's where we all end up. And I've got 5 days left to help David broker some of these divides. But it's really critical that we're all in this together. And I say we're all in this together because I'm leaving the city manager position, but my friends and my heart remain in the city, and I'm going to be active, and I'm going to be polite and whispering in people's ears. But it's really critical that especially those of you on this Zoom call today work together, and the city is more important than any one issue. And I really implore all of you to remember that and to put the city first. So as I look at, I only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to bounce. So really quickly, I want to thank all of my department directors, all of my staff. They've been awesome over the years. I can't thank them enough. And I have to say this, while I haven't loved all of you all of the time or all of you equally, the city council's been amazing. And what's been great about being city manager is I've had the opportunity to go to different cities and work on different panels, work on different committees. And I wouldn't trade any of you for any of the other council members out there. I mean, you guys have been great, and you've been great because you put the city first. And I applaud all of you for that. I want to give special recognition. Lindsay, you've been a great mayor. Thank you for the leadership during the pandemic. And we have two new great visionary council members who want to continue to move the city forward. And I applaud that effort. I think change is good. It's really time for a new generation to take the mantle. And I really look forward to the great things you're going to do. You guys are in great hands. David was a young pup when I met him, and and it is my style. I don't want to be anybody's boss. I want to work with you. I don't want anybody calling me my boss. And there's Andrew Campbell just popped up. And Andrew, it's great just seeing your name out there. So I love you and I miss you. So it's just been an amazing ride. I thank everybody who's supported me over the years. There's way too many people to list. I would have used my full presentation, just, listing the names, and there's just too many of them. So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been an amazing ride. I love you guys. And Jen, it's time for you to pop back on.
Yeah, don't stop, because we've got a couple things that we needed to do. So please stay, and everybody stay with us. It's just a few more minutes. So first I want to acknowledge the couple of elected official offices that wanted to acknowledge you. So first, Senator Ben Allen, we have Davis Hahn, and if Nalani could spotlight him just to say hello to you and acknowledge you. Go ahead, Davis.
Yeah, hello, Paul. Thank you just so much for all of your years in service to the city of West Hollywood. On behalf of all of our entire office, I think we're going to have a certificate sent your way in a couple days. While I'm newer to Team Allen, I know everyone had nothing but incredibly kind things to say about you and how much they've enjoyed working with you over the years, including from the senator himself. So just wanted to reiterate those thoughts that I've seen popping up in the chat this whole time. Thank you for all of your service and for all the great work you've done on behalf of the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. And then we have Josh Kirpies from Assemblymember Bloom's office.
Josh at the gateway.
Gateway. Congratulations on your retirement. It's well deserved. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but so glad that you're gonna be able to spend some time outside of City Hall. And she's gonna post it.
Sorry, I'll wait till you're ready. I'll wait till you're ready.
Whenever you're ready. In 2003, when I started working for City Hall, I got to know you, Paul, and you were a great boss then, and we stayed close throughout the years, and I really appreciate that. On behalf of our office and Assemblymember Bloom, I mean, you and Richard are close and have your own relationship independent of me. You know that he is so honored to have your friendship, and has been the city has been well served by you throughout the years while Richard has served in the assembly, and we're just so happy for you. And we wanted to present this to you. Richard will present it to you over lunch someday, but certificate or this resolution, well deserved. And thank you, Paul, for all your years.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And finally, Paul, what can I say? I started working in West Hollywood in 1999. It was the same year you took over as city manager, which I didn't know at the time. And you've always been my go-to guy, as my New York Italian husband would say. You go-to guy. You're that for many of us. You and our late friend Ray Reynolds. You were always there for us. You had a knack for making us feel like no matter what you would take care of us, and you did. For the most part, you really did. You're the first person I called when I resigned my job at the PDC. Before my husband, I called you.
And I applauded that.
Yes, you did. You celebrated that. You also convinced me to take this job. I don't know whether to hurt you or thank you. No, I'm just kidding. No, but really it's 12 years now. So thank you for convincing me. And, we were born the same year, a week apart, 1961. You've been my confidant and friend. And you've been an amazing advocate for the business community and the community at large. And we really will miss you. So to close the program, we want to raise a toast, and we want to send Paul off to a new phase to explore the age-old question of what else?
What's next?
for
Yeah.
what's next.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Paul. Thank you so much for everything you've
Thank
done
you.
for us.
I love you guys.
We love you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Good night, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.